The moon hung low over the dense forest, a pale, watchful eye casting silver beams through the skeletal branches. A chilling wind whispered between the trees, rustling the dry leaves like the murmurs of unseen spirits. The air smelled of damp earth and pine, of ancient secrets hidden within the shadows. High in the gnarled embrace of an ancient oak, the great horned owl sat motionless, a statue of vigilance against the night. Her golden eyes burned like molten fire, piercing through the darkness with an intensity that sent lesser creatures scurrying for cover. Beneath her, nestled safely within the fortress of twigs, moss, and downy feathers, her 3 chicks slumbered in a tangle of soft white fluff, their tiny chests rising and falling in rhythm with their dreams. They were helpless, their bodies too weak for flight, their beaks too small to fight. But they were hers, bound to her by blood and the instinct that pulsed through her veins like wildfire. Nothing would harm them. Nothing would take them. Yet, far above, something was watching. A shadow circled against the backdrop of stars, gliding effortlessly on the cold wind. A red-tailed hawk, a ruthless hunter, his keen eyes trained on the vulnerable nest. He had watched the owl for days, noting her patterns, studying the moment she left to hunt. He knew the chicks were nearly fledglings, plump, vulnerable, the perfect prey. Hunger gnawed at his belly, sharpening his purpose. Tonight, he would strike. Tonight, he would feed. He angled his wings, tightening his trajectory, and then, like a thunderbolt loosed from the heavens, he folded his wings and plummeted toward the nest. The air shrieked past him, the rush of wind growing deafening as his talons extended, curved and cruel, ready to snatch away one of the helpless chicks before the mother could react. But the owl had not spent her life ruling the night to be caught unaware. In a blur of silent fury, she erupted from the shadows, her great wings unfolding like a phantom storm. Her war cry tore through the night, a chilling scream that sent the smaller creatures of the forest diving into their burrows. She collided with the hawk midair, her talons striking like lightning, raking across his chest with merciless precision. The hawk screeched in pain, recoiling in midair, his body twisting to avoid another deadly blow. But he was not defeated. Not yet. He recovered swiftly, his wings snapping open as he gained altitude. His breath came in sharp bursts, his talons flexing in anticipation. He had underestimated her once. He would not make the same mistake again. The night belonged to the owl, but the sky belonged to him. And he would not leave without a prize. The owl hovered in place, her powerful wings beating in slow, deliberate strokes, her gaze locked onto the hawk with an unyielding fire. Her body was poised, every muscle coiled like a loaded spring. The hawk circled, testing her, looking for an opening, for a moment of weakness. But the owl was no fool. She had fought off rivals before. She had battled the elements, outwitted serpents that slithered too close, fended off raccoons that had dared climb too high. And now, she would fight again. The hawk struck. He came down fast, a blur of rust-colored feathers and savage hunger, his beak snapping toward the nest. His talons stretched forward, glinting in the moonlight. The owl moved like a shadow, intercepting him in a whirlwind of feathers and fury. Their bodies collided with a force that sent them spiraling downward, crashing through the branches in a chaotic storm of snapping twigs and scattering leaves. They hit a lower branch, the hawk pinned beneath the owl's crushing grip. He thrashed, his beak snapping wildly, but she was stronger. Her talons tightened around his shoulders, pressing him against the rough bark, her beak hovering just inches from his eye. A low, guttural hiss escaped her throat, a warning more ancient than words, more primal than reason. The hawk struggled, his wings beating frantically against her own. He twisted, using his greater wingspan to shove her back just enough to escape her grip. With a desperate lurch, he flapped hard, his body lifting off the branch, climbing back toward the sky. But he did not leave. His hunger was stronger than his fear. High above, he circled again, his breaths ragged, his pride wounded, but his resolve unshaken. He had already failed once. He could not return to his territory empty-taloned. He would strike again, harder, faster, before the owl could react. With a single decisive movement, he plunged downward. This time, he aimed not for the mother, but for the nest. The chicks peered over the edge, their wide, round eyes reflecting the moonlight, their tiny bodies trembling as the monster descended upon them. But their mother was not finished. She anticipated his move. She had studied him as much as he had studied her. She knew his hunger, knew his arrogance, and she was ready. She launched upward, meeting him head-on. Her talons locked around his shoulders, twisting him onto his back in midair. The hawk screeched, thrashing, his beak snapping wildly. But she did not let go. With a savage precision honed by generations of warriors before her, she clamped her beak around the back of his neck. The hawk convulsed, his body jerking, his wings faltering. Pain seared through his spine. His fight drained away. His mind screamed for him to retreat, to flee, to abandon this reckless hunt before it became his last. And then, freedom. The owl released him. The hawk barely managed to right himself, his wings trembling, his breath coming in sharp, ragged bursts. He hovered for a moment, his body heaving, his vision swimming. He had lost. The nest would not be his. With one last resentful glance at the owl, he turned and vanished into the night, his battered form swallowed by the endless void of the sky. The owl remained in place, her great wings still spread, her body tense, listening, watching. Her keen eyes swept the darkness, ensuring he was truly gone. And only when the forest fell silent once more did she return to her nest. Her chicks chirped weakly, pressing against her, their tiny beaks nudging her feathers as if to ask if the danger had passed. She lowered her head, brushing them gently with her beak, murmuring a soft, reassuring hoot. The wind whispered again, rustling the leaves, carrying with it the unspoken truth of the wild. There were no guarantees in this world, no mercy, no second chances. But there was instinct. There was love. There was the unbreakable bond of a mother who would fight to her last breath to protect her own. And as the moon watched from above, cold and unwavering, the great horned owl sat once more upon her perch, her golden eyes burning bright. The night was hers, and no predator would challenge her again.